To hear exclusive audiobooks not available on YouTube, visit the links in the description below. Thank you for your support. Selected Works of Mao Zedong, Volume 3. The Period of the War of Resistance Against Japan, Part 2. Section 16. A comment on the sessions of the Kuomintang Central Executive Committee and of the People's Political Council.
This editorial was written by Comrade Mao Zedong for the Liberation Daily, Yan'an.
October 5th, 1943. The Kuomintang held the 11th plenary session of its Central Executive Committee from September 6th to the 13th, and the Kuomintang government held the second session of the Third People's Political Council from September 18th to the 27th. Now that all the documents of both these meetings are at hand, we can make a general comment. The international situation is on the threshold of a great change, whose imminence is sensed on all sides. The European Axis powers have sensed it, and Hitler is adopting a desperate last-ditch policy. In the main, it is the Soviet Union that is bringing this change about. The Soviet Union is now taking advantage of it. The Red Army has already fought its way to the Dnieper, sweeping all before it, and another winter offensive will bring it to the old, if not to the new Soviet boundaries. Britain and the United States, too, are taking advantage of the change. Roosevelt and Churchill are waiting for the first sign of Hitler's downfall to thrust into France. In short, the German fascist war machine will soon fall apart. The problem of the anti-fascist war in Europe is on the eve of total solution, and the Soviet Union is the main force in annihilating fascism. As the world anti-fascist war has its pivot in Europe, once the problem there is solved, the fate of the two great world camps, the fascist and the anti-fascist camps, will be decided. The Japanese imperialists feel themselves cornered, and their policy, too, can only be to muster all possible strength for a desperate last-ditch struggle. In China, they will try to mop up the communists and entice the Kuomintang to capitulate. The Kuomintang has also sensed the change. Faced with this situation, it feels both joy and fear. Joy, because it imagines that with the war in Europe over, Britain and the United States will be left free to fight Japan on its behalf, and that it will be able to return to Nanking without any effort. Fear, because with the downfall of all three fascist powers, the world will enter a great and unprecedented age of liberation, and the Kuomintang's comprador feudal fascist dictatorship will become a small island in a vast ocean of freedom and democracy. It fears that its own brand of fascism, with its one party, one doctrine, one leader, will be buried beneath the waves. Originally, the Kuomintang hoped to have the Soviet Union fighting it out with Hitler single-handed and to instigate the Japanese to attack the Soviet Union so that the land of socialism would be destroyed or at least badly mauled. It also hoped that Britain and the United States would shift all their forces to the east and first smash Japan and then wipe out the Chinese Communist Party before bothering about any second or third front in Europe. It was for this ulterior purpose that the Kuomintang first clamored for a strategy of Asia before Europe, and then for equal attention to Europe and Asia. In August this year, towards the end of the Quebec Conference, when Roosevelt and Churchill summoned T.V. Soong, the foreign minister of the Kuomintang government, to Quebec and spoke a few words to him, the Kuomintang started shouting that Roosevelt and Churchill are turning to the east, that the Europe before Asia plan is changed, that Quebec is a conference of the three great powers, Britain, the United States, and China, etc., and joyfully indulged in self-glorification. But this was the Kuomintang's last occasion to rejoice. Since then, its mood has changed somewhat. Asia before Europe and equal attention to Europe and Asia have been consigned to the Museum of History, and now the Kuomintang is probably cooking up new schemes. Perhaps the 11th plenary session of the Kuomintang Central Executive Committee and the second session of the Kuomintang Controlled People's Political Council mark the beginning of these new schemes. The 11th plenary session of the Kuomintang CEC slanderously accused the Communist Party of sabotaging the war of resistance and endangering the state, and at the same time declared itself in favor of a political solution and of preparations for constitutional government. Controlled and manipulated by its Kuomintang majority, the second session of the third PPC passed resolutions against the Communist Party to roughly the same effect. In addition, the 11th plenary session of the Kuomintang CEC elected Chiang Kai-shek president of the Kuomintang government in order to strengthen its dictatorial machine. What can the Kuomintang be planning to do now, following the 11th plenary session? There are only three possibilities. 1. Capitulation to Japanese imperialism. 2. Dragging along on the old road. And 3. A change in its political line, serving the Japanese imperialists' purpose of hitting the communists and courting the Kuomintang. The defeatists and capitulationists within the Kuomintang have all along advocated surrender. They have constantly endeavored to unleash an anti-communist civil war, which once started, would naturally make resistance to Japan impossible, leaving capitulation as the only alternative. The Kuomintang has concentrated 400,000 to 500,000 troops in northwestern China and is stealthily diverting still more forces there from other fronts. It is said that the generals are in good fettle and are proclaiming, "Taking Yan'an is no problem." This is how they have been talking since Mr. Chiang Kai-shek's speech at the 11th plenary session, in which he described the communist problem as a political one and should be solved politically, and since the session's resolutions to roughly the same effect. Similar resolutions were adopted last year at the 10th plenary session of the Kuomintang CEC, and the ink was hardly dry before the generals were ordered to draw up military plans for liquidating the border region. In June and July this year, forces were deployed in preparation for a blitz against the border region, and the scheme was temporarily shelved only because public opinion at home and abroad was against it. Now, once again, no sooner have the resolutions of the 11th plenary session been put down in black and white than there are reports of the general's braggadocio and of troop movements. Taking Yan'an is no problem. What does this signify? It signifies a decision to capitulate to Japanese imperialism. Not all the Kuomintang members who favor taking Yan'an are necessarily conscious and determined capitulationists. Some of them may think, "We shall still resist the Japanese while fighting the communists." This is probably what many officers of the Whampoa clique are thinking. The Whampoa clique refers to those Kuomintang generals and officers who had once been instructors or cadets at the Whampoa Military Academy. They were Chiang Kai-shek's closest followers in the Kuomintang army. To these gentlemen, we communists would like to put the following questions. Have you forgotten the lessons of the 10 years of civil war? Once another civil war starts, will the determined capitulationists allow you to continue the war against Japan? Will the Japanese and Wang Qingwei allow you to continue the war against Japan? Are you really so strong that you can fight a civil war and a war against the foreign foe at the same time? You claim to have 3 million men, but your armies are so demoralized that people have compared them to 2 baskets of eggs on the ends of a carrying pole. One collision, and they are finished. This is what has happened in all the campaigns in the Chungtiao Mountains, the Taihang Mountains, Chekiang and Kiangsi, Western Hupe, and the Tapye Mountains. The simple reason is that you have followed the fatal policy of being active against the communists and passive against the Japanese. A national enemy has penetrated deep into our country, and the more actively you fight the communists and the more passively you resist the Japanese, the lower will be the morale of your troops. If you make such a poor show in fighting the foreign aggressor, can you expect your troops suddenly to become tough in fighting the communists and the people? It is out of the question. Once you start civil war, you will have to give it your undivided attention and inevitably abandon all thought of simultaneous resistance. In the end, you will inevitably find yourselves signing a treaty of unconditional surrender to Japanese imperialism, with capitulation as the only policy left to you. Those of you in the Kuomintang who do not really wish to capitulate will inevitably end up as capitulationists if you take an active part in instigating or prosecuting civil war. This will surely happen if you lend yourselves to the maneuvers of the capitulationist clique and use the resolutions of the 11th plenary session and the People's Political Council as an instrument for mobilizing public opinion and preparing for anti-communist civil war. Even if you do not want to capitulate in the first place, you will end up by surrendering in the wake of the capitulationist clique if you lend yourselves to their maneuvers and take a wrong step. That is the first possibility concerning the direction the Kuomintang may take after the 11th plenary session, and there is an extremely serious danger that it may materialize. From the standpoint of the capitulationist clique, talk about a political solution and preparations for constitutional government is the best means of camouflaging its preparations for civil war, i.e., for surrender. All communists, all patriotic members of the Kuomintang, all anti-Japanese parties, and all our fellow countrymen who are opposed to Japan should be sharply on the alert against this extremely grave danger and should not be fooled by the camouflage. It must be recognized that the danger of civil war has never been so great as it is now after the Kuomintang's 11th plenary session. There is another direction in which these resolutions may lead, that of stalling for a while and starting the civil war later. This course, which differs somewhat from that of the capitulationist clique, may be taken by those people who still want to keep up the appearance of resistance to Japan while absolutely refusing to abandon anti-communism and dictatorial rule. They may move in this direction since they see that great changes in the international situation are inevitable and Japanese imperialism is doomed. That civil war would mean capitulation and the people throughout the country are for resistance and against civil war. That the Kuomintang is in a state of serious crisis, having alienated itself from the masses, lost popular support, and become more isolated than ever. And that the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union are all opposed to the launching of civil war by the Chinese government. All this may force them to postpone their civil war schemes and play for time with empty talk about a political solution and preparations for constitutional government. These people are past masters in the tactics of deception and stalling. Even in their dreams, they do not forget their desire to take Yan'an and liquidate the Communist Party. On this point, they are entirely at one with the capitulationist clique. Nevertheless, they do wish to keep up the pretense of resistance to Japan. They do not wish the Kuomintang to forfeit its international standing, and they sometimes fear the censure of domestic and foreign public opinion. Therefore, they may stall behind the smokescreen of a political solution and preparations for constitutional government while waiting for more favorable conditions. They have no sincere desire for a political solution or constitutional government, at least certainly not at the moment. Last year, about the time of the 10th plenary session of the Kuomintang CEC, Comrade Lin Piao was sent to Chungking by the Central Committee of the Communist Party to confer with Mr. Chiang Kai-shek. He waited in Chungking for 10 long months, but Mr. Chiang Kai-shek and the Central Executive Committee of the Kuomintang had no desire to discuss a single concrete problem with him. In March this year, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek published his book China's Destiny, in which he emphasizes his opposition to communism and liberal ideas, shifts the blame for the 10 years of civil war onto the Communist Party, slanders the Communist Party, the 8th Route Army, and the new 4th Army as warlords of a new type and separatists of a new type, and implies that he will finish off the Communists within 2 years. On June 28 this year, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek permitted Zhou Enlai, Lin Piao, and other comrades to return to Yan'an. But at that very moment, he ordered his defense forces on the Yellow River to march on the border region. And he also ordered the local authorities throughout the country to seize the opportunity of the dissolution of the Third International to demand, in the name of so-called people's organizations, that the Communist Party of China be dissolved. In these circumstances, we communists were obliged to call on the Kuomintang and the whole nation to avert civil war, and we were obliged to expose all the Kuomintang's sinister schemes and conspiracies which were sabotaging the war of resistance and endangering the state. Our patience has been taxed to the limit, as the historical facts show. Ever since the fall of Wuhan, there has been no end to the anti-communist battles, large or small, in northern and central China. It is now 2 years since the Pacific War broke out, and throughout this time, the Kuomintang has been attacking the communists in central and northern China. Apart from the troops originally stationed there, it has dispatched the group armies under Wang Chunglian and Li Xianchu to attack the communists in Jiangsu and Shantung. Pang Ping-sun's group army in the area of the Taihang Mountains is under orders to concentrate exclusively on the communists. So are the Kuomintang troops in Anhui and Hubei. For a long time, we did not make even these facts public. The Kuomintang newspapers and periodicals have never for a moment stopped vilifying the Communist Party. But for a long time, we did not say a word in reply. Without any justification, the Kuomintang disbanded the new 4th Army, which was heroically fighting Japan, wiped out over 9,000 men of its contingents in southern Anhui, arrested Ye Ting, killed Xiang Ying, and imprisoned hundreds of its cadres. Although this was a monstrous betrayal of the people and the nation, we maintained our forbearance for the country's sake, simply lodging a protest and demanding redress. Ye Ting and Xiang Ying were respectively commander and deputy commander of the new 4th Army. When Mr. Chiang Kai-shek met Comrade Zhou Enlai, the representative of the Communist Party, at Lushan in June and July 1937, he promised that the Shensi-Kansu-Ningxia border region would be designated by decree as an administrative division under the direct jurisdiction of the Executive Yuan of the national government, and that its officials would receive formal appointments. Now, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek has not only eaten his own words, he has gone so far as to encircle the border region with 400,000 to 500,000 men to enforce a military and economic blockade. He will not be happy with anything less than the destruction of the people of the border region, as well as the rear headquarters of the 8th Route Army. It is particularly notorious that promised supplies have been cut off from the 8th Route Army, and that the Communist Party is abused as the traitor party, the new 4th Army as the rebel army, the 8th Route Army as the traitor army, etc. In short, all the Kuomintang people who are behaving in this way see the Communist Party as the enemy. To the Kuomintang, the Communist Party is 10 times, nay 100 times more hateful than the Japanese. The Kuomintang concentrates its hatred on the Communist Party and has little, if any, to spare for the Japanese. This resembles the behavior of the Japanese fascists, who treat the Kuomintang and the Communist Party differently. Concentrating their hatred on the Chinese Communist Party, the Japanese fascists have become more and more gentle with the Kuomintang. Of their 2 slogans, oppose the Communists and annihilate the Kuomintang, only the first now remains. The newspapers and periodicals controlled by the Japanese and Wang Qingwei no longer print such slogans as "Down with the Kuomintang" and "Overthrow Chiang Kai-shek." Japan is bearing down on the Communist Party with 58% of her forces in China and is just using 42% to keep watch on the Kuomintang. She has recently relaxed this watch and withdrawn many of her troops from Zhejiang and Hubei in order to make it easier to inveigle the Kuomintang into capitulation. The Japanese imperialists have never dared utter a single word to persuade the Communist Party to capitulate, but they have no hesitation in directing an endless stream of words to persuade the Kuomintang to do so. The Kuomintang is fierce only toward the Communist Party and the people, but it drops all its ferocity in the face of the Japanese. Not only has it changed from being a participant to being a mere spectator in the war as far as fighting is concerned, but even in words it dares not offer as much as a single sharp rebuff to the insults and blandishments of Japanese imperialism. The Japanese say, "There is nothing wrong with the line of argument in Chiang Kai-shek's China's Destiny. Has Mr. Chiang or any member of his party ever rebutted this? No, they have not and dare not. How can the Japanese help despising the Kuomintang when they see that Mr. Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang use military and governmental orders and discipline only against the communists, and neither desire nor dare to use them against the 20 members of the Kuomintang Central Executive Committee and the 58 Kuomintang generals who have deserted to the enemy? The people throughout the country and the friendly nations throughout the world have seen Mr. Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang disbanding the new Fourth Army and attacking the Eighth Route Army, encircling the border region, maligning them with such labels as traitor party, traitor army, warlords of a new type of separatist regime, sabotaging the war of resistance and endangering the state, and constantly invoking military and governmental orders and discipline. They have never seen Mr. Chiang and the Kuomintang enforcing any military orders, government decrees, or disciplinary measures against the 20 members of the Kuomintang Central Executive Committee and the 58 Kuomintang generals who went over to the enemy. Similarly, the resolutions recently passed at the 11th plenary session of the Kuomintang CEC and at the meeting of the People's Political Council are all directed against the Communist Party, while not a single one is directed against the many members of the Kuomintang CEC itself and the many army generals who have turned traitor and defected. What are the people throughout the country and the friendly nations throughout the world to think of the Kuomintang? As was to be expected, there was once again talk about a political solution and preparations for constitutional government at the 11th plenary session. Well and good, we welcome such talk. But judging by the political line the Kuomintang has consistently followed all these years, we consider this talk to be just so many empty words designed to dupe the people, the real purpose being to gain time for preparing civil war so as to perpetuate its dictatorial rule over the people. Is there a third direction in which the current situation may develop? Yes, there is. It is what a number of Kuomintang members, all the people, and we communists are hoping for. What is this third course? A just and reasonable political settlement of the relations between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party, a genuinely democratic and free constitutional government, the abolition of the fascist dictatorship with its one party, one doctrine, one leader, and the convening during the war of resistance of a national assembly genuinely elected by the people. We communists have advocated this course from the very beginning. A number of Kuomintang members will also agree to it. For a long time, we hoped that even Mr. Chiang Kai-shek and his own faction in the Kuomintang might pursue this course. But judging from what has happened in the last few years and what is happening now, there is nothing to show that Mr. Chiang and the majority of the Kuomintang personages in power are willing to do so. A number of conditions, international and domestic, are needed before this course can be realized. At the present time, With fascism in Europe on the eve of complete collapse, the international conditions are favorable to China's war of resistance. But it is at this very moment that the capitulators are especially eager to instigate civil war so that they can capitulate, and that the Japanese, and Wang Qingwei too, are particularly keen on civil war, so as to inveigle them into capitulation. Wang Qingwei said, according to the Dome news agency, October 1st, "Devoted brothers always remain brothers, and Chungking will certainly follow our road, the sooner the better, we hope." What affection, confidence, and eagerness! Thus, in the present situation, the best that can be expected from the Kuomintang is stalling, while the danger of a sudden deterioration is very grave indeed. The conditions necessary for the third course are not all present yet, and patriots of all parties and the people throughout China must make many-sided efforts to bring them into being. Mr. Chiang Kai-shek announced at the 11th plenary session,
"It should be stated clearly that the central authorities make no demands upon the Communist Party other than that it should give up its armed separatist regime and cease its surprise attacks on the National Army, which sabotage the war of resistance. It is to be hoped that the Communist Party will carry out its declaration made in the 26th year of the Republic, 1937, calling for united efforts to save the nation, and will put into effect the 4 pledges given in that declaration."
Mr. Chiang's talk of surprise attacks on the National Army, which sabotage the war of resistance, ought to be applied to the Kuomintang itself, and it is a pity that he is so prejudiced and malicious as to slander the Communist Party in this way. Since the fall of Wuhan, the Kuomintang has launched 3 anti-communist onslaughts, in each of which, as the facts show, the Kuomintang troops sprang surprise attacks on the communist forces. In the first campaign, from the winter of 1939 to the spring of 1940, the Kuomintang troops in their surprise attacks captured 5 county towns garrisoned by the 8th Route Army in the Shensi-Kansu-Ningxia border region: Chunhua, Sunyi, Chengning, Ningxian, and Chenyuan, even employing aircraft in these operations. In northern China, Chu Huaiping's troops were dispatched to the Taihang mountain region for a surprise attack on the 8th Route Army forces, which only fought back in self-defense. The second campaign was launched in January 1941. Earlier, on October 19, 1940, Ho Ying-chin and Pai Chung-si had telegraphed a categorical order to Chu Te, Peng Te Huai, Ye Ting, and Xiang Ying, commanding all units of the 8th Route and new 4th Armies south of the Yellow River, to move north of the river within a month. We promised that our troops in southern Anhui would move north. As for the others, while it was impossible for them to be shifted in the circumstances, we promised that they would move to the assigned positions after victory in the anti-Japanese war. Yet before our 9,000 men in southern Anhui began moving north on January 5th, in compliance with the order, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek had already issued another order to catch them all in a dragnet. Between January 6th and the 14th, the Kuomintang troops in southern Anhui actually did catch these new 4th Army units in a dragnet. Moreover, on January 17th, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek ordered the whole new 4th Army to be disbanded and Ye Ting to be court-martialed. The 8th Route and new 4th Armies have since been attacked wherever there are Kuomintang troops in the anti-Japanese base areas in central and northern China, and they have only fought back in self-defense. The third campaign began in March of this year and is still going on. The Kuomintang forces have continued their assaults on the 8th Route and new 4th Armies in central and northern China. In addition, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek has published his China's Destiny, which is a diatribe against communism and against the people. He has diverted many of his Yellow River Defense forces for a lightning attack on the border region. He has instigated so-called people's organizations all over the country to demand the dissolution of the Communist Party. He has mobilized the Kuomintang majority in the People's Political Council to endorse Ho Ying-chin's military report vilifying the 8th Route Army and to adopt anti-communist resolutions. They do not understand the party's system of democratic centralism. They do not realize that the Communist Party not only needs democracy, but needs centralization even more. They forget the system of democratic centralism, in which the minority is subordinate to the majority, the lower level to the higher level, the part to the whole, and the entire membership to the Central Committee. Chang Kuo-tao asserted his independence of the Central Committee of the party, and as a result, asserted himself into betraying the party and became a Kuomintang agent.
Footnote. Chang Kuo-tao was a renegade from the Chinese Revolution. In early life, speculating on the revolution, he joined the Chinese Communist Party. In the party, he made many mistakes resulting in serious crimes. The most notorious of these was his opposition in 1935 to the Red Army's northward march, and his defeatism and liquidationism in advocating withdrawal by the Red Army to the minority nationality areas on the Sichuan-Zhejiang borders. What is more, he openly carried out traitorous activities against the party and the Central Committee, established his own bogus Central Committee, disrupted the unity of the party and the Red Army, and caused heavy losses to the Fourth Front Army of the Red Army. But thanks to patient education by Comrade Mao Zedong and the Central Committee, the Fourth Front Army and its numerous cadres soon returned to the correct leadership of the Central Committee of the party and played a glorious role in subsequent struggles. Chang Kuo-tao, however, proved incorrigible, and in the spring of 1938, he slipped out of the Shenxi, Kansu, Ningxia border region and joined the Kuomintang secret police. End of footnote.
Although the sectarianism we are now discussing is not of this extremely serious kind, it must still be guarded against, and we must do away completely with all manifestations of disunity. We should encourage comrades to take the interests of the whole into account. Every party member, every branch of work, every statement, and every action must proceed from the interests of the whole party. It is absolutely impermissible to violate this principle. Those who assert this kind of independence are usually wedded to the doctrine of me first, and are generally wrong on the question of the relationship between the individual and the party. Although in words they profess respect for the party, in practice they put themselves first and the party second. What are these people after? They are after fame and position and want to be in the limelight. Whenever they are put in charge of a branch of work, they assert their independence. With this aim, they draw some people in, push others out, and resort to boasting, flattery, and touting among the comrades, thus importing the vulgar style of the bourgeois political parties into the Communist Party. It is their dishonesty that causes them to come to grief. I believe we should do things honestly, for without an honest attitude, it is absolutely impossible to accomplish anything in this world. Which are the honest people? Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin are honest. Men of science are honest. Which are the dishonest people? Trotsky, Bukharin, Chen Tuxiu, and Chang Kuo-tao are extremely dishonest. And those who assert independence out of personal or sectional interest are dishonest too. All sly people, all those who do not have a scientific attitude in their work, fancy themselves resourceful and clever, but in fact they are most stupid and will come to no good. Students in our party school must pay attention to this problem. We must build a centralized, unified party and make a clean sweep of all unprincipled factional struggles. We must combat individualism and sectarianism so as to enable our whole party to march in step and fight for one common goal. Cadres from the outside and those from the locality must unite and combat sectarian tendencies. Very careful attention must be given to the relations between outside and local cadres, because many anti-Japanese base areas were established only after the arrival of the 8th Route Army, or the new 4th Army, and much of the local work developed only after the arrival of outside cadres. Our comrades must understand that in these conditions it is possible for our base areas to be consolidated and for our party to take root there only when the two kinds of cadres unite as one, and when a large number of local cadres develop and are promoted. Otherwise, it is impossible. Both the outside and the local cadres have their strong and weak points, and to make any progress, they must overcome their own weak points by learning from each other's strong points. The outside cadres are generally not up to the local cadres in familiarity with local conditions and links with the masses. Take me, for instance. Although I have been in northern Shensi 5 or 6 years, I am far behind the local comrades in understanding local conditions and in links with the people here. Our comrades going to the anti-Japanese base areas in Shanxi, Hopei, Shantung, and other provinces must pay attention to this. Moreover, even within the same base area, owing to the fact that some districts develop earlier and others later, there is a difference between the local cadres of a district and those from outside it. Cadres who come from a more developed to a less developed district are also outside cadres in relation to that locality, and they too should pay great attention to fostering and helping local cadres. Generally speaking, in places where outside cadres are in charge, it is they who should bear the main responsibility if their relations with the local cadres are not good, and the chief comrades in charge should bear greater responsibility. The attention paid to this problem in some places is still very inadequate. Some people look down on the local cadres and ridicule them, saying, "What do these locals know? Clodhoppers." Such people utterly fail to understand the importance of local cadres. They know neither the latter's strong points nor their own weaknesses and adopt an incorrect sectarian attitude. All outside cadres must cherish the local cadres and give them constant help and must not be permitted to ridicule or attack them. Of course, the local cadres on their part must learn from the strong points of the outside cadres and rid themselves of inappropriate, narrow views so that they and the outside cadres become as one, with no distinction between them and us, and thus avoid sectarian tendencies. The same applies to the relationship between cadres in army service and other cadres working in the locality. They must be completely united and must oppose sectarian tendencies. The army cadres must help the local cadres, and vice versa. If there is friction between them, each should make allowance for the other and carry out proper self-criticism. Generally speaking, in places where army cadres are actually in positions of leadership, it is they who should bear the main responsibility if their relations with the local cadres are not good. Only when the army cadres understand their own responsibility and are modest in their attitude towards the local cadres can the conditions be created for the smooth progress of our war effort and our work of construction in the base areas. The same applies to the relationship among different army units, different localities, and different departments. We must oppose the tendency towards selfish departmentalism, by which the interests of one's own unit are looked after to the exclusion of those of others. Whoever is indifferent to the difficulties of others refuses to transfer cadres to other units on request, or releases only the inferior ones, using the neighbor's field as an outlet for his overflow, and does not give the slightest consideration to other departments, localities, or people. Such a person is a selfish departmentalist who has entirely lost the spirit of communism. Lack of consideration for the whole and complete indifference to other departments, localities, and people are characteristics of a selfish departmentalist. We must intensify our efforts to educate such persons and to make them understand that selfish departmentalism is a sectarian tendency which will become very dangerous if allowed to develop. Another problem is the relationship between old and new cadres. Since the beginning of the War of Resistance, our party has grown enormously, and large numbers of new cadres have emerged. That is a very good thing. In his report to the 18th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Comrade Stalin said,
"There are never enough old cadres. There are far less than required, and they are already partly going out of commission owing to the operation of the laws of nature."
Here he was discussing the cadres situation and not only the laws of nature. If our party does not have a great many new cadres working in unity and cooperation with the old cadres, our cause will come to a stop. All old cadres, therefore, should welcome the new ones with the utmost enthusiasm and show them the warmest solicitude. True, new cadres have their shortcomings. They have not been long in the revolution and lack experience, and unavoidably some have brought with them vestiges of the unwholesome ideology of the old society, remnants of the ideology of petty bourgeois individualism. But such shortcomings can be gradually eliminated through education and tempering in the revolution. The strong point of the new cadres, as Stalin has said, is that they are acutely sensitive to what is new, and are therefore enthusiastic and active to a high degree, the very qualities which some of the old cadres lack. Cadres, new and old, should respect each other, learn from each other, and overcome their own shortcomings by learning from each other's strong points, so as to unite as one in the common cause and guard against sectarian tendencies. Generally speaking, in places where the old cadres are mainly in charge, it is they who should bear the chief responsibility if relations with the new cadres are not good. All the above, relations between the part and the whole, relations between the individual and the party, relations between outside and local cadres, relations between army cadres and other cadres working in the locality, relations between this and that army unit, between this and that locality, between this and that department, and relations between old and new cadres, are relations within the party. In all these relations, it is necessary to enhance the spirit of communism and guard against sectarian tendencies, so that the ranks of our party will be in good order, march in step, and therefore fight well. This is a very important problem, which we must solve thoroughly in rectifying the party's style of work. Sectarianism is an expression of subjectivism in organizational relations. If we want to get rid of subjectivism and promote the Marxist-Leninist spirit of seeking truth from facts, we must sweep the remnants of sectarianism out of the party and proceed from the principle that the party's interests are above personal or sectional interests, so that the party can attain complete solidarity and unity. The remnants of sectarianism must be eliminated from the party's external as well as its internal relations. The reason is this: we cannot defeat the enemy by merely uniting the comrades throughout the party. We can defeat the enemy only by uniting the people throughout the country. For 20 years, the Communist Party of China has done great and arduous work in the cause of uniting the people of the whole country, and the achievements in this work since the outbreak of the War of Resistance are even greater than in the past. This does not mean, however, that all our comrades already have a correct style in dealing with the masses and are free from sectarian tendencies. No. In fact, sectarian tendencies still exist among a number of comrades, and in some cases to a very serious degree. Many of our comrades tend to be overbearing in their relations with non-party people, look down upon them, despise or refuse to respect them or appreciate their strong points. This is indeed a sectarian tendency. After reading a few Marxist books, such comrades become more arrogant instead of more modest, and invariably dismiss others as no good without realizing that in fact their own knowledge is only half-baked. Our comrades must realize the truth that Communist Party members are at all times a minority as compared with non-party people. Supposing 1 out of every 100 persons were a communist, then there would be 4,500,000 communists among China's population of 450,000. Yet, even if our membership reached this huge figure, communists would still form only 1% of the whole population, while 99% would be non-party people. What reason can we then have for not cooperating with non-party people? As regards all those who wish to cooperate with us, or might cooperate with us, we have only the duty of cooperating, and absolutely no right to shut them out. But some party members do not understand this and look down upon, or even shut out, those who wish to cooperate with us. There are no grounds whatsoever for doing so. Have Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin given us any grounds? They have not. On the contrary, they have always earnestly enjoined us to form close ties with the masses and not divorce ourselves from them. Or has the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China given us any grounds? No. Among all its resolutions, there is not a single one that says we may divorce ourselves from the masses and so isolate ourselves. On the contrary, the Central Committee has always told us to form close ties with the masses and not to divorce ourselves from them. Thus, any action divorcing us from the masses has no justification at all and is simply the mischievous result of the sectarian ideas some of our comrades have themselves concocted. As such, sectarianism remains very serious among some of our comrades and still obstructs the application of the party line. We should carry out extensive education within the party to meet this problem. Above all, we should make our cadres really understand how serious the problem is and how utterly impossible it is to overthrow the enemy and attain the goal of the revolution unless party members unite with the non-party cadres and with non-party people. All sectarian ideas are subjectivist and are incompatible with the real needs of the revolution. Hence, the struggle against sectarianism and the struggle against subjectivism should go on simultaneously. There is no time today to talk about the question of stereotyped party writing. I shall discuss it at another meeting. Stereotyped party writing is a vehicle for filth, a form of expression for subjectivism and sectarianism. It does people harm and damages the revolution, and we must get rid of it completely. To combat subjectivism, we must propagate materialism and dialectics. However, there are many comrades in our party who lay no stress on the propaganda, either of materialism or of dialectics. Some tolerate subjectivist propaganda and regard it with equanimity. They think they believe in Marxism, but make no effort to propagate materialism and do not give it a thought or express any opinion when they hear or read subjectivist stuff. This is not the attitude of a communist. It allows many of our comrades to be poisoned by subjectivist ideas, which numb their sensitivity. We should therefore launch a campaign of enlightenment within the party to free the minds of our comrades from the fog of subjectivism and dogmatism, and should call upon them to boycott subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing. Such evils are like Japanese goods, for only our enemy wishes us to preserve them and continue to befuddle ourselves with them. So we should advocate a boycott against them, just as we boycott Japanese goods.
Footnote. Boycotting Japanese goods was a method of struggle frequently used by the Chinese people against Japanese imperialist aggression in the first half of the 20th century, as in the patriotic May 4th movement of 1919, after the September 18th incident of 1931, and during the War of Resistance against Japan. End of footnote.
We should boycott all the wares of subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing, make their sale difficult, and not allow their purveyors to ply their trade by exploiting the low theoretical level in the party. Our comrades must develop a good nose for this purpose. They should take a sniff at everything and distinguish the good from the bad before they decide whether to welcome it or boycott it. Communists must always go into the whys and wherefores of anything, use their own heads and carefully think over whether or not it corresponds to reality and is really well-founded. On no account should they follow blindly and encourage slavishness. Finally, in opposing subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing, we must have in mind two purposes. First, learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. And second, cure the sickness to save the patient. The mistakes of the past must be exposed without sparing anyone's sensibilities. It is necessary to analyze and criticize what was bad in the past with a scientific attitude, so that work in the future will be done more carefully and done better. This is what is meant by learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. But our aim in exposing errors and criticizing shortcomings, like that of a doctor curing a sickness, is solely to save the patient and not to doctor him to death. A person with appendicitis is saved when the surgeon removes his appendix. So long as a person who has made mistakes does not hide his sickness for fear of treatment, or persist in his mistakes until he is beyond cure, so long as he honestly and sincerely wishes to be cured and to mend his ways, we should welcome him and cure his sickness so that he can become a good comrade. We can never succeed if we just let ourselves go and lash out at him. In treating an ideological or a political malady, one must never be rough and rash, but must adopt the approach of curing the sickness to save the patient, which is the only correct and effective method. I have taken this occasion of the opening of the party school to speak at length, and I hope comrades will think over what I have said. End of section 6.